So let's get started, everyone. Welcome to our very first panel on consulting. We're very happy as the Association of Asian Healthcare Leaders, or AAHL or AL, to present this as a first kind of branch off of what we've traditionally done in the hospital administration and healthcare administration world. So we're super excited to do this event, and I'm going to share a little bit about our organization as we go forward. So once again, we are the Association of Asian Healthcare Leaders. And what we have here on this screen is some of our core values that we see. So I'm gonna give some people some time to read it. Our core values are give, in terms of career development, gather, which is engagement, and grow, which is outreach. So we hope that as people join and see more of these type of events, that you guys can join us in our goal of reaching other Asian American professionals and allies in this space as we continue to see Asian professionals in the healthcare administration, business, and consulting space. Next, we are very happy to partner with RYSE Network for this. A lot of you have come from the postings that we've done on the RYSE Facebook page, so we're extremely happy to see. And I'm going to let Carl, who is the leader of RYSE, introduce himself as well as share a bit about their organization.
Hey folks, my name is Carl. My pronouns are they and he. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge that I'm calling from the traditional, unceded, and ancestral territories of the Coast Salish, Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam nations, also known as Vancouver, Canada. I'm so happy for this collaboration. Before I even talk about RYSE, I want to talk about why Asians in healthcare is so important to me. I was born in Taiwan and my mom was a nurse, so I've always had huge respect for healthcare professionals. And I've heard, and I've also heard about stories about how people of color are often misdiagnosed and mistreated within the healthcare industry, predominantly in spaces where it's very white centric. Right. So I've heard a lot about those stats, but for me personally, I experienced that. I am disabled and neurodivergent, and I've always had a lot of physical issues. I went to a lot of doctors. I wasn't feeling well. It wasn't until I found an Asian doctor who told me that Asian bodies and other folks' physical bodies are quite different, and I have quite the severe case of liver cirrhosis, right? And that is quite common in Asian folks, whereas white people usually just diagnose it as like fatty liver or just like unhealthy eating habits or drinking, but mine is hereditary. So, from that moment on, it further solidified for me how important it is to have a very diverse set of lens when dealing with a diverse set of individuals. So, when I was approached about this event and, promoting it, of course, I was 100% down for that. As mentioned, I am the founder of RYSE Professional Asian Network. We are a huge group of folks. We have over 62,000 members in our Facebook group, and we are from all over the world. It is a place for you to talk to each other, to get support. If you have questions about, for example, microaggressions at the workplace and how do you deal with certain things, how do you ask for a raise, all that kind of stuff, ask that in the group. We answer that. There's also a lot of job postings, many of them in the healthcare industry. I am posting in the chat right now. You can check out our website. Most of our engagement is in our Facebook group. We also have a Facebook page. Check it out. Message me if you have any questions. Again, thank you so much for having me here. Super excited for this event.
Super, thanks, Carl. Once again, this is our second collaboration with RYSE. We previously partnered with them when they were known as Subtle Asian Networking for our Pathways to Healthcare Administration event with different degree focuses. If anyone's interested in seeing a recording of that, paths to MHA, MBA, MPH, etc., careers in healthcare, just shoot a message in the chat and we can find that link for you guys. Without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to our panelists real quick. I'm gonna just read down the line and let them introduce themselves as well after, in the same order I'm introducing them here. But we have Simran Khadka, who is an advisory associate at KPMG, Sol Lee, health strategy consultant at Manatt Health, Sana Imam, who's a manager of digital business technology at Sogeti, and finally, last but not least, Austin Hong. He's a former senior consultant at Deloitte. So in that same order, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
I can get started. Thanks. Thanks, Edward. My name is Simran, and I am currently an advisory associate at KPMG. I apologize about my background. My building just had a fire alarm go off, and I had to find the closest parking lot that I could find to have this conversation and talk to all of you today. But I graduated with my health administration degree from Columbia Public Health, and I am currently in KPMG's Health and Government Solutions Advisory practice. The practice composes of healthcare solutions, deals with providers, payers, and the government solutions part deals with state and local government agencies and parts of federal government as well.
Great. So I think I'm up. My name is Sol. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all, and really excited that everyone's gathering here really from all over the country and the world. So my name is Sol. I have a non-traditional background going into health consulting. I did my neuroscience degree at Emory, got my bachelor's, wanted to go to med school initially, did all my MCATs and Orgo, quite unfortunately, and then decided and got really interested in the systems and policy level of healthcare, and decided that my interests and really what I thought I would be better at doing really align more with the strategy and the policy side of health. So I pivoted, went to grad school for public policy instead at U Chicago, and then upon graduating, I did my internship and then received an offer to go back to Manatt Health, which is a small consulting firm. We have about less than 200 people nationwide under our law firm, and we do a lot of policy and strategy work with state governments, providers, plans, payers, etc. And so that is a little bit about me, and I'll pass it off to Sana.
Thanks, Sol, and thank you to Al for inviting me to this panel, and the rest of us really excited for this evening to spend it with all of you. My name is Sana Imam, and I'm currently a manager over at Sogeti, which is a subsidiary of Capgemini, in our digital business technology space. My experience stems in the healthcare operations space, so mergers and acquisitions. Previously used to work for Accenture, Navigant, Guidehouse, and now Sogeti. And really throughout the vein that I've stayed consistent with is helping health systems understand how to operate at reduced margins. With increased cost savings opportunities while never compromising delivering the quality of care. So I've touched really all aspects of running a hospital, and I'm looking forward to kind of sharing some of the learnings that I've had to learn the hard way with all of you today. Austin, go ahead.
Awesome, thanks, Sana. So a lot of impressive folks on the panel here, so I'm equally excited to be talking here with Al and RYSE, some impressive networks we have. So just a quick introduction on my end so we can dive into this. As Edward described, I'm a former senior consultant from Deloitte Consulting, was in the operations transformation group, legacy, strategy, and ops. Sorry, Slack is blowing up there. And I primarily worked with health plans, PBMs, and towards the latter half of my career, actually touched upon a little bit of the provider side as well as some home health networks. And so my background is a little serendipitous. So I studied finance and marketing in college, never thought of healthcare as a future career, spent 2 years in risk, and then found myself in consulting and landing in the healthcare industry. And it's been 3.5 years since then. I've loved it. I'm pursuing an MBA right now and hoping to focus on healthcare as well. So if you're kind of in that background, happy to talk to you after the session as well.
Awesome. Great, everyone. Thanks for sharing. Love to see the variety of backgrounds from what you studied, how you got to where you are, but glad that we are all tied together today by, at least our panelists, by their career paths currently and where they are professionally. And we'll learn more about where they hope to be and some more about all those aspects. So let's kick off our time. Again, if you have any questions, if you're in the audience, please use the Q&A function. We do have some preset questions we'd love to hear from our panelists, but use that function for the Q&A at the end. And basically, we're going to do the moderator-led discussion with a Q&A afterwards as we head off for the night. So we will start with our first question. And this is going to be for Sana. And the question is, what initially sparked your interest in consulting? How did you choose your current specialty and area of focus? You know, we all have been maybe in healthcare backgrounds, but specifically we wanted to hear about what drew you to consulting.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. And Sol and I have really similar stories, but went to Georgetown for my undergraduate, was a neurobio major, pre-med. So yes, I had no life. And finished the entire pre-med curriculum and was still deathly afraid of blood and needles. And of course, if I'm a neurobio major, I had a mind over matter type of mentality. So ended up going over to Georgetown Hospital and doing rounds. And the round that did it for me was the NICU unit. And I said, this is going to be really difficult, but if you can get through this, you can get through anything. Yeah, I didn't get through it. I'll never forget it. It was the day we delivered triplets. The first baby comes out and I'm like, all right, okay. It's a little hot in here. Second one comes out and I was like, wow, I'm sweating. Third one comes out and I was out the door because I was literally about to faint. And that's when I realized that I wasted my life and my 8 a.m. in pre-med courses. But for me, genuinely, my entire goal was to be a neuro-oncologist. And I wanted to practice for about 10, 15 years and move on to running a hospital. I really wanted a C-suite position. And I thought that in order to be a good executive, I needed to have that clinical background. So fast forward, it's junior year of Georgetown. And I'm like, well, now what am I going to do? I go through our course listing and somehow managed to pop into a MHA course titled Healthcare Consulting. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. Let's figure it out. Come to realize it's actually my dream job packaged in a course that I wish someone had said it to me years ago. I would have never wasted my time being pre-med. But that's where I discovered that my passion of helping operate hospitals and physician practices actually existed. And I didn't need an MD to be good at my job. And so in that moment, I completely transitioned and finished up and did my MHA while I was at Georgetown as an undergraduate, and then went on to Drexel to do my master's in public health, because I realized that it's important to have providers, saving lives on a day-to-day basis, but I wanted to make change at a much higher level that affected populations. And so whether that was, and what I ended up finding was, after doing a little bit of a stint in the policy world, I realized politics is just too slow for me. And so more and more consulting was the perfect kind of match for me, because in a consulting world, every week you're pushing items faster and faster and faster. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell of why I'm in healthcare consulting. And I must say, this is what I was born to do.
That's fantastic to hear, Sana. And if the audience can't see me, it's because I removed my spotlight, but I'm here. I'm not a specter. But again, for our panelists, we do have a number of questions, but if anyone feels very strongly during any of these questions that they want to add on, please feel free to. So I'm going to open up the floor for maybe one more panelist to speak on this before we move on to the next question. On how you got interested in consulting.
I can chime in. Just a quick response for this one, Edward. So from my perspective, I spent 2 years in risk advisor, and I wish I had a really compelling kind of epiphanic moment like Sana had. I did not see triplets being born, but I had a career in risk advisory before consulting. And so that typically is IT security, IT controls. And I just realized I didn't really want a career where clients were bringing me in because it was an audit or a kind of Sarbanes-Oxley regulatory need. And so personally for me, I knew that I wanted to have more of a strategic influence on the operational success and bottom line kind of development of my clients. And so that's kind of what started my career in consulting. I'm not going to dive into why healthcare, because that was an entirely divergent perspective. But consulting is so broad, and I'll touch upon it. I know there's another question in the panelist questions here about the range of consulting roles you can get into. But essentially, that's why I chose consulting and why I hope to go back to consulting after my business degree.
Awesome, Austin. Thanks for sharing that different perspective and adding on to the initial question from my prompt. Next question we have is, what should individuals, this is for Austin, so it works out well. What should individuals keep in mind before pursuing a career in healthcare consulting, including any challenges and what's also the positive and rewarding aspects?
Yeah, I think, I'm sure the panelists and I can all talk about this for hours on end because there's so many different ways you can break into what we call healthcare consulting. And the reason why I kind of put that in air quotes is that healthcare consulting is so many different things. You saw Asana talk about suggesting and making recommendations to improve population health. You hear Sol talking about policy-oriented consulting, policy-oriented strategy, whereas my background is in operational improvement. So for example, I work with claims processing. So, if X billion-dollar health plan is processing 80 million claims a year, how do we make sure that that can be done twice as fast? So it didn't really touch the patient outcome at the end of the day, but by lowering costs, you would hope it lowers costs for the consumer at the end. Another aspect that I did was, an M&A venture. So that's a different, entirely business-focused aspect of healthcare. But a third and fourth kind of tranche of healthcare is also technology implementation. You can do fully technology enterprise resource planning implementations in healthcare companies, which is probably like a 40% chunk of what healthcare consulting is. And then finally, you have human capital. So going back to the questions of what do I think you should consider before pursuing a career in healthcare is really understanding two things. The first is what sector of healthcare you're looking to break into. Are you personally passionate about providers, payers, PBMs, life sciences, biotech, or even policy? And then the second piece is, what do you want to do once you get there? If you just want to break into healthcare, maybe you start with technology or you start with human capital. But if you really want to help improve patient outcomes and the consumer at the end of the day, find a consulting firm that specifically does that, because your larger firms are going to do all flavors of healthcare consulting. But you're also going to have a very specialized and intentional firm like Manatt that's doing specifically policies and policy strategy, like Sol shared here. So the first is pick which part of the sector you want to do. And then the second is what function within that sector. And then there's also the third tranche of maybe you want to be a generalist and you're just trying to figure it out, because that's where I was 3 years ago. And that's an entirely different path to go down as well. So hopefully I didn't just confuse everybody and was a little bit helpful.
No worries. I think that was actually really good insight. Healthcare consulting can be very nebulous sometimes, similar to what healthcare management is for a lot of people, at least for myself when I was going into the field as well and studying that. So thanks for the answer, Austin. We'll move on to our next question. But before I do that, I want to give notice to what's on to put in the chat saying, this was a smaller group, but she said the best part of the consulting is the hotel and the points. So that is something that we can definitely talk about later as well. But next question is for Sol. What was your search criteria when you were seeking consulting opportunities? And ultimately, why did you decide to work at your current organization? I know you shared about it a little bit, but want to hear more.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Ed. So to answer the question about how I chose my current firm and what was my search criteria, I entered grad school, like I said, really wanting to pivot and using my grad school degree, education skills, and network as a pivot towards consulting, because I had no kind of econ stats business consulting background, and I really wanted to understand and better know what is out there. I think the kind of framework that helped me to choose and ultimately select where I ended up working is I thought about, and then what Austin said was really helpful for this. I thought about, where do I really want to be in 20, 30 years? And for me, that answer really was, I want to be working with legislators, policymakers at some sort of federal or state government level, and making policies that make sense to help affordability, equity, access, et cetera. And so even that is very broad, but that gives me at least some sort of guidelines when I'm looking at different firms and when I'm looking at the kinds of projects that they do, the kinds of clients that they work with, their staffing model and structure, and all of these kinds of things that so I could start to slot in and fill in what those details might look like to really get me to the place where I want it to be. The consultant tenure on average is maybe about like 2 years. And one of the interview questions I got was, hey, we know that consultants who come in generally don't stay very long, maybe 2 years if we're lucky. Why should we take you in? And so you should be able to have a good answer for that when you're looking at consulting firms, because each firm really does have its own flavor and unique profile and culture that I think really is important, not just for the company, but also really for your own fit, your own comfortability, and then really what you're getting out of that role. Because like Austin said, both consulting and the healthcare field is so broad. So really there is just so much you can do with that. And it's on you to understand what you want and really take that initiative and go for it. So that's a kind of broad answer to the question, but if there are any other follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer as well.
Edward, I don't mind adding a little bit to that and also answering one of the questions in the chat. Someone asked a question about how do you find fulfillment in a role that doesn't include direct patient care? And I think it's really important to keep in mind, this is what I do for myself, is to keep in mind why you're there and what role do you play in this ecosystem. So for example, when the COVID pandemic hit, all of my client work that had to deal with operations implementation was paused, right? I mean, everyone was just trying to deliver care the best that they can. So then FEMA and all this type of funding, they open their doors and say, you can start applying for FEMA funding to cover 75% of all COVID related costs. And so then we transitioned really quickly at my firm and started helping all of our hospitals clients apply for that funding. When I was a healthcare consultant, that doesn't sound very glamorous, of filling out an application and getting those labor hours, et cetera. But although I was working 22 hours a day, what kept me going was our providers need to be on the ground providing patient care, and they don't have a job unless I find a way to get them paid. And so, and really understanding where you fit in the larger ecosystem, it can still mean a lot without having to be a provider. I mean, I actually just said this an hour ago. I have a client who's an ex-orthopedic surgeon and created her own digital health company to help surgeons with their procedure card process. And so we were talking about Hurricane Ida, and we said, well, let's use that as a reason to help motivate us and continue our conversation and have a good meeting, because if we do what we do well, then we're able to optimize time in the OR and help our providers see more patients in an event of an emergency and also throughout the day. So I think it's just important to keep that top of mind. You don't need to be a provider to have an impact, because there's so much that happens in the background.
Awesome. Thanks for that addition, Sana. And I hope you're getting more than 2 hours of sleep a night now. So moving on to our next question, you talked about some of the value that you're providing and the niche that you fill in a variety of different projects and situations. So our next question is for Simran, and I know you have to keep things as private as you can, but based on what you can talk about, we'd love to hear about some of the exciting opportunities or projects that you had the opportunity to work on.
Sure. So this is probably a great question where everybody can pitch in, because I've only been at KPMG since January, and I want to give my full disclaimer now that that I may not have as many opportunities yet. But when I started off at the firm, I was involved in a design thinking engagement with one of the federal healthcare agencies, and we tried to map out the user journey of how some Medicare/Medicaid beneficiaries go through the enrollment process across various states. And then after that engagement ended, I am currently working on a PBM contract process improvement engagement where we're trying to see how PBM team reviews their pricing contracts and how that can be improved with one of their clients. I think something that really keeps me going is not just what work that I could be doing on a day-to-day basis, but what potential work could be out there. Aside from doing your day-to-day engagement, a lot of associates are often involved in proposals or bidding process where you apply for work. And recently, I've worked on 2 really cool proposals. One of them was helping a large conglomerate expand their digital health reach. And the second proposal is just improving operations in an emergency department and trying to win more work through an extension. So I think it's important to not just look at the cool work that's happening on a day-to-day basis, but also help out on the other work that could happen in the future. So also please step in, because I don't have as much experience as everybody else in this panel.
Simran, thanks for your answer and thanks for the transparency. But even now, in the short time that you said that you started in January, it looks like you've had some really interesting projects and engagements. So I'd love to hear about some of the projects that you are able to share about as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said, I do a lot of health strategy and policy is really what our firm does. And when I tell people that, they're always like, what the heck does that really mean? And so I think just to highlight, I could give a few really quick examples that kind of connect and might tell a story. But in California right now, there's a really big initiative called CalAIM, which is basically a really big program to enhance their Medicaid program, which is called Medi-Cal in California. And over the next few years, they really want to transform their Medicaid system to be connected more with non-traditional healthcare providers. So think about a housing provider or medically tailored meal provider, and also your behavioral health providers that you might be able to use your Medicaid dollars to fix, for example, mold in your house that's exacerbating your asthma and causing you to go to the ER every month. It might be cheaper for Medicaid to actually pay for your housing provider to fix up that mold problem so that you don't go to the ER every month. And so there are really kind of complicated payment questions, operational questions, financing, and really a need to integrate the data, payment, and health ecosystems that all of these traditional providers have not been a part of. And so how do we best do that? How do we best lay out a plan for that over the next couple of years? How do we best allocate our dollars that we're spending? And so that's a really big initiative in California that we're helping to supplement kind of the strategy, the policy rollout side of things as it will be launched in January of next year. Related to that, there's a lot of work tangentially that might be done. We're also working with a big health information exchange in California, which really gathers a lot of the data and then makes it usable and then acts as a go-between between state government, plans, providers, payers. And we're thinking about what are the use cases that will be necessary for data exchange and data requirements, things like consent management, referral management, data storage, being able to communicate between providers and plans. And we're thinking about what can that HIE currently do, and under CalAIM, what might be some expanded use cases that this HIE is interested in exploring or developing capacities for. And the things like we work with a lot of AMCs or academic medical centers for their 5-year strategies and things of that nature. So those are just a couple of different kinds of flavors of the kind of work that we might do on a policy or strategy side.
Awesome. So I had a lot of fun listening to all the different kinds of things, and it seemed a little bit intimidating, but definitely seems like you've done a lot of good work. Next question is for Simran again. Actually for Sana, I apologize. So, similar to Sol, talking about all the different kinds of projects, a variety of them, there's probably a lot of different skills involved as well, both hard and soft. So question for you is, what do you believe are some hard and soft skills or experiences that distinguish you as a good consulting candidate?
Absolutely. This is a fabulous question and one of my favorite ones to talk about with my mentees and make sure they have a very clear understanding of what's a hard skill and what's a soft skill. So when we talk about hard skills, and especially for those who want to go into consulting, it's important to understand that you have to understand the recruiting process. And that process includes a behavioral interview, a topical interview, and a case interview. And fourth, some firms are also doing some sort of technical exercise. So the first and most important technical skill that I tell everyone is you gotta know data analytics. You need to know Excel. If you know SQL or Tableau or SAS, Python, etc., that's a plus. But at the bare minimum, you need to know Excel. You need to be proficient, because their entry-level consulting role, no matter where you go, you're going to be the data analyst of the team. And so it's really important to know that from the back of your hand. From there, of course, understanding how to synthesize large amounts of information into something that a layman can understand, where you're not losing the essence of what the information is. Because oftentimes as an entry-level consultant, you're doing a lot of that data analytics and you're able to see the nuances, but then you're going to translate it and share it with your director, who's then going to tell it to the client. And you can't tell your director the 3 hours of research that you spent, or the 3 hours of work that you spent working on deliverable, you got 30 minutes with them, and then they've got 30 minutes with the client. So being able to understand how to synthesize is really crucial. And then your soft skills, I think, are equally as important. How do you hold yourself, and what is executive presence? And it's important to understand that in consulting, you're working with the C-suite, you're working with VPs, you're working with department leads. And when you're an entry-level consultant and you're in your early 20s, that can be intimidating at times. So it's important to remember all of those basic rules of, being respectful and how it is to conduct yourself in a meeting. Texting during a meeting is an absolute no-no, especially as an entry-level consultant. You will look forward to getting yelled at. But also, what can you deliver in day one? And to me, be a strong note taker. If that is your skill, that's a skill that will take you so far. I am almost 30 and I'm about to cry saying that, but I am the best note taker there is, whether I'm doing work or my nonprofit work or anything else. And that's a skill that everyone knows me by, but that also means I hold all the information and control how it goes out, right? So pick a soft skill, whether it's you're the Excel guru, you're the PowerPoint whiz, you know how to make a PowerPoint slide look amazing. Whatever that skill is, be the best at it and share that with other people. Because I promise those higher level execs and your directors, they don't really want to care about the bold and the italicized, et cetera. They want the information there and what they'll say to you is make it look pretty. It's up to you to figure out what that means. And so those are skills you can work on. First and foremost, please know Excel, because whether you do consulting or anything else, we're in the digital age of technology where gathering data and synthesizing is important. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think I would just add that really be flexible and open-minded about what that can look like and what you're really developing over the years. One advice actually that one of my mentors gave me was, so you're great at PowerPoint and making things look pretty, just make sure that's not the only thing you're known for, or you might be, the go-to person for that. So I thought that was really funny, but helpful advice just to be like, consulting is really about working with people. And when you work with people, when you work with teams, what really is your brand? What do you want to be known for? What do you want to be? What do you want people to go to you for? And so really thinking about that and being intentional about building those skills, whether it be soft or hard, like Sana was mentioning, I think is really important.
Awesome. Thanks both Sana and Sol for speaking on all those points. And Sana, actually, in answering this question, you brought up kind of a good segue to our next question on this is actually for Simran. What recommendations do you have to prepare for the different rounds of interviews? She touched upon behavioral and case and otherwise. What tips do you have for our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So to be transparent, when I interviewed KPMG, they strictly focused on behavioral, and it was 3 stages of behavioral questions, and they really dug deep into the work that I've done and, really placed me in hypothetical case that weren't formal cases, but pushed back on a lot of the storytelling around my responses. So, but I would admit that since I did apply for the administrative fellowship before I was interviewed at KPMG, that gave me plenty of preparation. Now that administrative fellowships are incorporating a lot of case questions, technical interviews as well, and even group interviews, I felt well prepared for my role at KPMG. But I can't say that my experience is going to be the same across consulting, because I know some consulting firms are very rigorous about their case interviews and their technical interview process. I still went ahead and prepared for that. I used a couple books. I used Case in Point, and it's called mconsulting.com. And that has a series of consulting cases that you could use to practice. I was in campus when I was going through this process, so I had plenty of classmates who helped each other out. So I got help from a lot of classmates who case prep with me and gave me valuable advice on what I did right, what I didn't do right. So it really came down to a lot of practice and just building that comfort over weeks and weeks of going through interviews.
Awesome. Simran, thanks for the answer. awesome. Would love to hear some tips you might have for someone who's coming from your background or coming straight from college, because I think some of our other panelists are coming from their graduate programs as well.
Yeah, so I think some tips is really being flexible and applying to everything and casting a really wide net. I can't emphasize, looking back at my Excel sheet, when I applied to jobs, I applied to about 100 plus positions across consulting, fellowships, full-time positions in payers, as well as full-time positions in healthcare providers. So casting a wide net and being comfortable with rejections is one tip. The second is definitely reaching out to the alumni network and being comfortable asking to learn about their experience first before you ask for a referral. I don't feel comfortable asking anyone for a referral, but if I know I'm interested in something that someone is doing, then I always ask for an informational interview so I know more context about what the work is being done at the specific organization. And third is really just staying in touch once you make those connections. Reaching out to someone is one thing, but keeping in touch with them and letting them know how you're doing and how they've helped you is just, it goes another level. I've actually started reaching out to some of my mentors in grad school and they love hearing from me. So I say going back to casting a wide net, practicing, making new connections and keeping up with them.
Yeah, and I can also add to that. I know there's a few questions out there about, do I need a master's degree to pursue a career in healthcare consulting? The answer is no. I myself came out of undergrad into Deloitte. I did not have a master's degree at the time. I was fortunate where I entered as a generalist and just kind of received all the healthcare information that I needed while on the job. And I think all the panelists can attest that oftentimes we're thrown into new industries, new regions of the world, new policies where we need to do all the research ourselves, or we reach out to kind of the subject matter experts that are within our own firms. What I will say is, at Deloitte, at the very least, the interviewing process that I'm aware of for experienced hires, so anyone that's not in undergrad, typically is a combination of case and behavioral, like Simran just described. But the cases tend to be non-industry focused. And so it's more just on your problem solving skills. So books like Case in Point will help you. And then the behavioral is a combination of soft skills as well as basically tell me anything and everything from your healthcare experience so that you can help credentialize yourself. And so on the point of credentialization, that's where an MHA, an MPH, and MBA really comes into play. So if you yourself don't think you have enough healthcare experience, maybe that's something you want to consider. But if you do have 2-3 years of healthcare experience in whatever field, it can be from, as an administrative fellow, it can be as a nurse or an MD. I've seen the range of different healthcare backgrounds enter into consulting. And then just gonna lastly kind of touch on this. There's been a few questions about, I'm an MHA, MPH, MBA student now. Everything Simran just shared about, practice your case books, do your networking, all of that still comes into play with your master's program. Some master's programs will have great consulting clubs, like I outlined in one of my responses, where you can kind of reach out and get the timeline, but some of it, it's just going to have to be on your own volition. So I'd recommend just reading those case books and reaching out to the recruiters, because at least at Deloitte, healthcare was hiring like crazy when I left. So I'm sure it's still the same way.
Awesome. Field is ripe. That's encouraging to hear. Simran and Austin, thanks for their answers for the last question. And Simran, I'm glad you touched on your experience interviewing for consulting and fellowships. That's something that I was doing at the same time, and I'm sure many of our people who might be in graduate programs like MHA, MPH, et cetera, might be doing as well. And definitely an exercise in time management and adjusting to all those different interview type styles. I'm glad to hear that both kinds of places are interviewing with similar styles of questions. Closing up on time, we have 2 more quick questions. So this one's for Sol. Looking back at your first year of consulting, what are some things you would have done differently?
Yeah, great question. I'll try to make it a little quicker, but I think for me, I thought about this, and I think it boils down to really understanding my own limitations. I think people who are consultants and want to be in the space really are type A people. I'm not very, very type A, but I definitely had big goals and expectations for myself when I entered grad school, when I entered this field, when I started my new job. And you really do have such a limited capacity in terms of your time, your mental bandwidth. and really how you want to focus your energy. And so for me, instead of raising my hand for every opportunity, I think I quickly learned that I can't say yes and really do everything that I want to do, whether it be projects or volunteering extra firm time. And so really thinking about what are my top 3 or even top 2 priorities for what I want to accomplish big picture during this quarter or during the next quarter, and writing those down and making sure I have a plan to stick to that. So for me, for example, I think those 2 things really fleshed out to be, and are still being, identifying people and teams that I want to stick with and work with for over the next couple of years or 1 or 2 years, and really thinking about why and what kinds of opportunities will that grant me as well. So so to answer that question and recap, I think it's just understanding, again, coming back to the big picture question of how can I really maximize the time that I have at the firm, maximize my experiences with the understanding of my own capacities in these spaces, to really make sure that you are giving your A+ effort and exceeding on everything that you do. So
awesome, love it. That people focus is so important. What I'm finding as not in consulting, but even in my fellowship, post fellowship at the organization that I worked at during the time, is that those connections will be oftentimes lifelong and career long and industry wide. So fantastic to hear. Last question before we move on to the Q&A is for Austin, and Sana, if you have time after, you can chime in as well. But how is your day-to-day travel, such as travel and casework and otherwise in the life of a normal consultant, pre-COVID change as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, I'll try to keep this as short as possible. So first, clients were like, holy crap, what are we doing? All projects stopped. Like Sana said, operations implementation stopped. Everyone just like hand in the air. You know, I was in the claims department, so they were like, what is a COVID claim? How do we even price this? And so that was a whole moment. But then after 3 months, everyone kind of realized they were doing okay and they weren't bleeding money. And so what I'm saying by that is project work kind of picked back up. And so it was actually, recovery in healthcare was a lot quicker than I expected. Because after 3 or 4 months, the request for having more consultants on the ground just kind of picked up again as business as usual. And so I said I'd keep this short. Other aspects, travel completely stopped, but as of August of this year, there are consulting teams, at least at Deloitte, that were traveling. And I've worked on a few sales proposals where they actually requested us to travel. So it sounds like clients are wanting us on the ground. And then I'll end with, although that is the case, it seems like the firm and the industry as a whole is being a lot more lenient into that work-life balance aspect of, if you want to stay home, we can make that work, because we did a 15-month study where we were just as successful.
Yeah, I can absolutely echo what Austin said. I mean, I used to travel Monday through Thursday every single week. And all of a sudden I've been sitting at home and I don't know what to do with myself. But I will say, there's another question that I want to tie this to about just consulting in general and the time that it takes. To be in healthcare consulting, you've got to be passionate about what you're doing and why you're here. Because especially on those travel weeks, it can be gruesome sometimes. And so I just am a person who loves to travel. And so I used to get a high off of a 6 a.m. flight from Denver to California. I land, I go straight to client site, I have my meeting, go back to the hotel, have team dinners, and go back. I enjoyed it. I really did. That's why I became a workaholic, because I loved what I did. But I think the second piece that I want to add is, you don't have to work at one of the top 5 firms or Blue Cross Blue Shield, or you don't have to work at a big company to have a healthcare consultant experience, right? All healthcare consulting is advising your hospitals, health systems, payers, physician practices on how to do their job just a little better. That's saving money. That's really achieving the triple aim, and now quadruple aim, because we've added physician burnout to it, right? So those principles that you're learning, that's all consulting is. So pre me joining Navigant, I worked at Philadelphia's Health Information Exchange, where we facilitated the exchange of patient information between all of the hospitals in the Philadelphia region and broader. And that's still consulting, right? So I really urge folks to not get so gung-ho behind, it's only Deloitte, KPMG, McKinsey, BC, like there's a world so much more outside of that where you're still offering help and services. So just keep that in mind.
Awesome. You can tell it's consultants on this panel because they're very acute of meeting times and being respectful of that. So I appreciate you guys synthesizing your answers like that. Luckily, throughout the time, also our great panelists have been answering some of our questions in the Q&A section through the actual chat. So as we go through this next portion of Q&A, you guys can also look at the answer tab to see what's already been answered. So just let me take a look real quick through some of these. And it even looks like as we speak now, some people are typing some answers, which is great. Here's a question from an anonymous attendee in the Q&A section, which asks, what potential in your career do you see thus far for promotions? And as a consultant, do you find it difficult to keep moving your career forward? Simran, I see you raised your hand, so feel free to, anyone at this point, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for asking that question. And something that I've noticed when I came to KPMG is that the metrics for your performance are very standardized. So when I first came in, I tried to ask what would be an ideal timeline to become a senior associate. And it was approximately a 2 to 3 year timeline. And at first I saw myself getting there, but looking back, I realized that, there are so many ways to improve what I need to do. And that includes strict categories such as business development, leadership, technical competencies. So in terms of promotion, I definitely see myself working towards senior associate in the next 2.5 to 3 years, but I anticipate staying myself there for a while because I look at the responsibilities that a manager has to do, and I know that it's going to take a long time before I get there. So I think it's good that there are standardized metrics that kind of tell you whether or not you can or can't be at the next level.
If I could add to that also, I think I've probably gone through a couple rounds of promotion. It's also important to remember that you are in charge of your destiny. So if you want to be promoted, it's important for you to say that to people. I know at my old firm and also in this firm, of course, your metrics matter. And the way promotion is really important wherever you go. Understand your performance review process. What are the metrics you're graded upon? It's not just client utilization and billable hours. There's so much more than that. And then also what piece of the process is dependent upon just peer review, right? So you want to get feedback on a regular basis. You want to document it. But there's also a piece of what we did in our old firm was, your performance manager would put you up for promotion, and then the whole group, which was senior leaders, would say yes or no. So it's not just being a good consultant and delivering on your clients and having a solid relationship with the performance manager. It's also building a relationship across the firm with other leaders and showing them that you can, do the next level and reach that kind of work. It's equally important, especially because at the end of the day, I think someone mentioned this earlier, consulting is a people game. So if you stay only focused on your client and you only know your team, what is that? Are you someone that can sell a book of business? Are you someone that can go to an executive and expand our scope of work? So it's important to remember that it's equally important to network within your company and within your department, because that can also play a huge role in your promotion.
Awesome, really good insight there, both Simran and Sana. Looking through some of these questions that people continue to keep answering. I see one that is pretty good. We talked about hard skills and soft skills earlier. Someone asked, how do I increase some of those hard skills, specifically data analytics and Excel? Do you guys have any resources or things that you use that helped you?
Excel for dummies. I'm not even lying.
Yeah, I mean, I can chime in on this. There's definitely a project where I was dubbed the analytics point of contact, and I was not the analytics point of contact. Let's just say that much. But it's like I said before, a lot of self-learning, not just in the healthcare sector, but in all regards. So yes, Simran, LinkedIn Learning was a huge saver for me for Excel and Tableau, but there's so many free resources out there nowadays. It's just, you don't need a certification. I saw a question come up for that. So don't think you need an analytics certification. Because once you get, as long as you get through the first round interview and get through the door, you can really highlight what experience you do have with analytics.
Super. And I know we'll do one more question, and this is really fascinating. I think that you guys will probably have a fun time answering it. This question is from Vashni G. The question is for Sana, but I can open it to everyone. How is consulting services changing with newer digital technology and data activation tools emerging in every industry vertical, especially healthcare?
I think in the past, we used to create a lot of tools manually. And now if you were to look, there's a software platform for literally anything and everything. So, I mean, now I'm in a role where I'm doing a lot of that EHR implementation, cloud migration type of stuff. But I think as Austin was saying, that's a certain sector that you can go into more and more as we're adopting digital tools. It's important to understand what an implementation looks like, because at some point you're going to touch it. And so I think as consultants, as you are constantly honing your skills of what it is that I know, it's equally important to understand how you can leverage digital tools to gain efficiencies, because it's absolutely possible. These big consulting firms are partnering at high levels, right? I mean, whether it's IBM Watson or just recently, my old company Guidehouse just acquired Dovel. There's now a huge synergy of typical management consulting and digital tools, and they're merging on purpose. And so I think as young consultants who are looking to enter this field and do more, it's really important to keep your eye on what's happening in the digital innovation sector, because it's only going to make you a better consultant if you come back to your client and say, here's another piece of software that we can use to improve this process. So I think it's gonna potentially change what we do, and it'll be a lot of in-house growth and development between these consulting firms, but they're also going to buy up a lot of these software companies that are doing the work for them, which is helping their clients issue problems.
I'll add onto that. I think Sana raised some great points. There's just like a plethora of like all these software and data companies out there. I liked how this question is phrased, because data and digital technology, you can't look left or right without seeing a new company in a new industry, because it's literally everywhere. So like Sana said, you have to keep up to date to really know what's going on. And it's not to say you need to read Data Weekly every week, but just really understand how companies are incorporating data and analytics. So I think the healthcare thesis around data in short form is providers have way too much data, but not enough technical experts to sift through it. And then payers have not enough data, but too many SMEs at the top. And then on the other end, I'm going to look at Sol for this because I'm not a regulatory person, but I think there's some stuff around data integration and data transparency coming out from a regulatory perspective that's supposed to come due in the mid 2020s. So you have all of these things converging, and the issue that I've seen at large healthcare companies is they're creating all of these analytic resources, but they don't know really how to use it strategically. And so that's where consultants really come into play really well. And it's pretty exciting work, because you really just connect the dots for them and really help them to do it. Because oftentimes you have 50, 55-year-olds running healthcare companies, and then they're getting these daily dashboards that are just colorful symbols and letters and stuff, and they just don't know how to use it. And so that's not a problem just in healthcare, but that's just to provide some context as to what I've seen in the industry from a payer provider perspective, and then how the regulatory agencies might influence changes down the road.
Great. Thank you all for your answers there. Oh, actually, yes, he did point to Sol. So let me do that.
Oh yeah. So I accidentally censored all the panelists again, but so I definitely agree with everything Sana and Austin said. I think there is a world of data out there, and more as payment methodologies evolve, as we get more into population health metrics programs, and think about how can we better incentivize things like value-based care and payments. Data really is at the center of how healthcare is evolving. And if we think about digital health and all the tools and technologies we have there, COVID-19 really has accelerated and necessitated a change and shift, whereas before it really might have been optional to have any kind of digital health offerings, but really more and more as we move forward, I think people will, consumers and patients will expect and really need digital health and also data tools to supplement their healthcare.
Awesome. Everyone, awesome answers. Thanks so much for your insight. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen once more as we close up today. But I think this is, this is a really great time, and I've learned a lot. You guys used really consulting like words, but I really appreciate you guys answering all my questions and the questions of our audience. I'm sure there are many other questions that people have. So if that's okay. I think all of you guys are on LinkedIn. I found some of you guys on LinkedIn, and some of our team members on the board interacted that way. So I think hopefully people can reach out to you as well. And before we end, wanted to go ahead and kind of share some next steps for Al as we close out, and again, let everyone thank the people think in the chat to our panelists. So Andrew, I think I promoted you back. You wanted to share about our upcoming event.
Yeah, happy to do so. Thank you again to our awesome panelists. Definitely learned a lot as an attendee. Could have listened for another hour. So very insightful. And thank you again so much for your time. In the spirit of aligning with our core values of gather and engagement, we are hosting our our inaugural West Coast Gathering on September 18th. I know it says June, but it's September 18th. At Laguna Beach, top of the world. I'll be leading this morning hike, and am hoping that I won't be hiking alone. So if anyone is interested, please feel free to RSVP by September 16th by using the QR code below. And I think this is just the beginning of many gatherings, and we're hoping for a really successful turnout. So looking forward to seeing everyone on September 18th.
Awesome. And if you guys are in our LinkedIn group, you will definitely see that. We'll also send an email with this information on that West Coast Gathering to those who signed up and attended this panel, as well as those who weren't able to make it. And we hope to get a recording up soon for everyone to see it, and for our panelists to share with their friends and family to show how awesome they are, as we all know here. And it's for anyone also to share with your classmates or friends or people looking to get in this field. But once again, we thank you all for your time, with love from the Association of Asian Healthcare Leaders, as well as from RYSE and Carl's team there. But once again, thank you all to our panelists for being awesome, and we appreciate you. We hope to see you guys all in the future engaging with our members here at AAHL and with each other, hopefully as well. So have a great night, everyone.